2025 Policy and Government Relations Committee meeting of the School District of Waukesha Board of Education. Mr. Thomas Harland is excused for this evening, and with that, I will call the meeting to order. All right, we'll start with verification of meeting posting. Julie, can you please verify that the meeting has been properly posted?
Yes, it has.
All right, thank you. All right, next is our opportunity for citizens to speak. Do we have any speakers this evening?
We do not.
Okay. Then with that, we can move on to item 2 on our agenda. Our first action item is the minute approval. We did not meet in March, so the minutes that are in front of you for approval this month are from February 10th of 2025. Do I have a motion to approve those minutes?
I move to approve the minutes from the February 10th meeting as presented.
All right, thank you, Mrs. Voigt.
Second it.
Seconded by Mr. Borowski. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor of approving minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, passes 4-0. All right, next on our agenda item is policy discussion. First one is around a technical correction for policy 8310, public records. Dr. Siebert.
All right, thank you, Mr. Wad, and good evening, everyone. This is a very simple one. We updated a few years back to a 7-year records retention schedule, and so the word current is added to refer to that 7-year records retention schedule, and the words expiring March 20th, 2033 are removed because that's no longer prevalent in public records for the School District of Waukesha. The second one, do you mind if I just roll through these, Mr. Watt? And if anyone has any questions.
If anyone else have any questions on that one before Dr.
Well, it just,
moves on?
isn't there also adding the word board member and above that, or,
Oh,
I mean, it's minor, but,
it is minor, yes, that's fair. So it says, nothing in this policy shall be construed as preventing a board member from inspecting in the performance of his or her official, and then the word board member duties.
Okay.
Yeah, is added.
so that is still part, okay.
That
just
is
wanted to make
part
sure.
of it, yes. Thank you for pointing that out, Mr. Borowski. The second one is a technical correction to policy 6320 on purchasing. There are 2 additions here to match policy language. Ethics and conflict of interest in the first paragraph, which is the name of the policies that we'll talk about here in just a little bit. And then the major technical correction is the addition of the hiring of consultants, which is a policy 8125 consultants that the committee approved and the full board approved. I want to say maybe 2 months back, it feels like. So that's pretty straightforward. And then the last one is on policy 6230, another technical correction. That's our budget hearing policy. And all that one is doing is eliminating the word of the Wisconsin state statutes and referencing 6590 with stats, and then referencing 6590 with stats on the bottom of the policy. And Julie just included a copy of 6590, which is the state statute on municipal budgets, just for your perusal. So relatively minor technical corrections.
Anyone have any questions on the technical corrections as presented? Any discussion needed? All right, thank you, Dr. Siebert.
You bet.
With that, we can move into Section E of our agenda, policy discussion and possible action. The first item up is policies 1130, 3230, 4230, all dealing with ethics and conflict of interest. Dr. Siebert.
All right, so thank you, Mr. Wad. These are examples of policies that are in the various series. So 1,000 refers to administration, 3,000 professional staff, 4,000 references support staff. And these are Neola recommendations. They're a little different on each one, but they're pretty much the same. So let me just kind of go through the first one, 1130. 1130, the administrative policy, is really focused around avoiding the occurrence or appearance of conflict of interest. We go down to B on page 1. A new sentence is added: administrative employees shall not directly supervise a relative employed by the district or employed in a position contracted for by the district. That's just good solid practice that we already adhere to, but having that added to the policy makes sense. Referencing an administrative staff member in number 1 on that page. And then number 3, gained versus granted, and then through their access to school district records is added. And then F is the one I wanted to draw your attention to. It's making a paragraph that exists already in the other 2 policies, the 3000 series and the 4000 series, but referring to administrative employees and a pecuniary interest. So not putting themselves as administrators in a position that a pecuniary interest means an interest or in a contract or purchase that will result or is intended to result in an ascertainable increase in income or net worth of the employee or the employee's dependent. So an example, let's say, for example, I write a book about something educational, right? And now I, as the superintendent, tell Darren, well, we're going to buy that book for all the principals, so they're going to read it. And then the principals, you're going to buy that book for all your teachers are going to read it, and I'm making money on that. That would be inappropriate of me to do. So I think the corrections to, or the additions to this policy just continue to make sure that administrators are always thinking about not having any conflict of interest. We have such a solid team of administrators. I don't worry about it on a regular basis, but I do think having some of that language in there makes these policies stronger.
Ms. Veit?
I was going to say, this is one of the policies that I looked at before I ran, because this policy pertains as well to the professional conduct by board members.
Oh, sure.
And I did, reach out to WASB legal advisors, under the recommendation of the former superintendent. And they prompted me to say, every time we have the pecuniary interest, like the contracts that are up this coming month for my 2 daughters as educators, that the safe thing is to say that, I'm going to recuse myself to avoid the perception of, like a conflict of interest, even though, as I look really closely at section F, because they're not my dependents any longer, because I'm not like supporting them in any respect, it technically doesn't pertain anymore, but I still, like, that was what they told me I should say, like, right away and just recuse myself on those kinds of contracts. And I guess I like seeing the fact that it's not necessary, but it's still, you don't want it to look like it's a bad thing, It's that perception of a conflict of interest that, is important to the community.
Good points, Mrs. Voigt.
Mr. Browski?
Yeah, just a question or clarification. Under C1 on page 1, there right at the bottom, the part in green that was added with an administrative staff member, shouldn't the word right before it be classes, not class? 1 or more classes? I know that's minor, but this stuff just jumps out at me.
I would say it should.
You're so good at that.
Yeah.
Just, yeah. All right, I can sleep tonight now. All right.
Yeah, we can do that. I think that's a good addition. In 1 or more classes with an administrative staff member.
All right.
I'm good with that. Anyone?
If the committee's fine with that, I
Yeah, I
think
think
that's
that's
a good
fine.
addition.
And Dr. Siebert, I just have one quick question, and I think I know the answer, but I'm going to ask anyway. So I'm looking at item B, administrative employees shall not directly supervise a relative. When we talk directly, we're talking where there is a direct supervisor relationship, 1 level, right? So if, like, let's say you had a director of teaching and learning, they could have a spouse or relative in a teacher's role, but maybe not a principal's role. Is that?
I think that's a fair example, yes. And the way that I'm interpreting this and the way that I think it should be interpreted is like a principal is not going to evaluate someone in their family directly in that school.
Right,
Right?
okay.
Or a director or someone down here is not going to evaluate someone in their department that's related to them.
Right.
But if there's not a direct nexus and there's some separation of levels,
Yep.
that's going to be fine. And the other way you can accomplish it is if there are spouses, for example, in a school, then you have someone else do the observing
Right.
and evaluation of that particular employee.
Okay. That was
Good
what I
question.
assumed. I just wanted to make sure I understood it.
Oh, good question. All right, so these are kind of a package deal if we want them to be. So let me just explain the next two, and then you can decide how you want to go about it. 3230 is the professional staff policy. The first sentence of the second paragraph is simply rewritten to avoid the occurrence or appearance of any conflict of interest that we saw earlier. B, similar again, that they should not directly supervise someone. And then already so in 3, use, sale, or improper or divulging of any privileged information about a student, that's a different way of saying what they crossed out. And then F on page 2 was with the pecuniary interest piece that we talked about with the administrators. That's already in the professional staff policy, so that stays the same. They just copied that into the 1100 series, and that is the extent of the changes in the 3000 policy. And then actually, the 4000 policy is exactly the same as the 3000 policy with the same interests and having that same letter F already. So sometimes what we find with Neola policies is that over time, even policies in the same series don't always look the same. And so sometimes what Neola is doing through either feedback from the field or just in a genuine continuous improvement process is making sure that those policies do line up and talk across a series when they look like this in the different categories.
Dr. Siebert, anyone have any questions, comments? Mr. Brooks?
Yeah, I would just point out that change for class to classes would apply to the other two as well, just so that we're.
Oh,
making sure
good
that
point,
it's
Mr. Brooks.
consistent across the board.
So they would all get classes on the C1 on the first page.
Yep.
Any other comments, questions? If not, I would be looking for a motion to approve these as presented.
Also move.
Moved by Mr. Browski, seconded by Mr. Brooks. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor of adopting policies, revisions to policies 1130, 3230, 4230, ethics and conflict of interest, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? None, passes 4-0. All right, our next policy discussion and possible action item is for policy 0166.1, consent agenda. Dr. Siebert.
All right, thank you, Mr. Wad. So this policy is being brought forward as an internal School District of Waukesha edit. Mr. Wad, Julie, and I have taken a look at this policy, and it really started with specifically the last sentence of the policy that says, any item on the consent agenda may be removed and discussed as a non-action item or be deferred for further study and discussion at a subsequent board meeting if the superintendent or any board member thinks the item requires further discussion. So from that standpoint, this has been a Neola policy for many, many years, dating back to 1996. It would never be my belief that, as the superintendent, I would have the right to pull something off of your board agenda, right? Like, that's not my role. My role is defined in policy 1210, which I also included, and that would apply to the cabinet too, where our participation shall be by professional counsel, guidance, and recommendation as distinct from deliberation, debate, and voting of board members. So I wouldn't ever want to be in a position where you would think that I could pull something off the consent agenda. So that was part of the reason that we recommend striking the last sentence. And then secondarily, we've had some discussion with letter H, changing that to current policies and bylaws that have been revised by a board committee at least 24 hours prior to a board meeting. There's been some concern since we've started doing policies in committees that sometimes the policies we might do in HR at 6 o'clock and make a change to, then come to the board, and the board members may not have had an opportunity to see that. Where at least with our meetings, for example, there's a couple of days that board members have an opportunity to see the changes that you may have made as a committee. So that was something that Mr. Wad and I talked about. And then the other thing we talked about was the rest of the last paragraph, we think fits our current practice. A member of the board may request an item to be removed from the consent resolution agenda and defer it for specific action and more discussion. No vote of the board will be required to remove an item from the consent agenda. And then a single member's request shall cause it to be relocated as an action item eligible for discussion. And then we have an add, that was Mr. Wad's suggestion, and/or action in the current board meeting. So just getting more specific in terms of the way that the consent agenda truly functions for the board here in Waukesha. So that's the rationale behind the suggested school district edit, and so certainly I think Mr. Watt and I would be happy to try and answer any questions that you might have.
Mrs. White?
I think that the change, especially to H, is a really good one. You know, I think it's important for the spirit of transparency, for people to know what's happened at all the meetings where the policies have been reviewed. I like the strategy of having the policies be broken down by the different committees that have more direct impact in terms of the decision that they're making. Back when this would have originally been written, it would have been such that, policy would have met usually like the week after the regular board meetings back, in years back. And then you'd have 3 weeks before the next board meeting before there'd be any discussion about it. But now by having policies at every one of the subcommittees, potentially depending on what the policy is, I think it's important to have a space to be able to have a chance to review what the policy discussions were about. And to go from that meeting, literally right to this meeting, doesn't allow for that kind of transparency.
Mrs. White? Mr. Browski?
Oh, so just to make sure I'm clear on this, so those items that, I guess, in this case, it probably all applies to just HR committee items if they're approved. So those won't even be attempted to put on the consent agenda. They'll be put on as a separate item, and they'll still be voted on at the board meeting that evening, but just not on the consent agenda.
That's correct. That would be my understanding. And what I kind of intended, what that does is, first of all, it does make the policy change transparent because it will be discussed and potentially debated rather than just approved on the consent agenda. But it also provides the opportunity for board members to amend it or to perhaps refer it back or table it for some period of time to give people more time to consider it, rather than just being included within the consent agenda and passed without the visibility that I think Mrs. Voigt properly points out can be lost, especially with that committee. The other thing I'll point out is that's the way it would be now. Who's to say that there won't be some change in our committee schedules down the road that it may be others, but right now, primary concern, I think, is HR committee because it meets right before the board.
So the only, other question I have, I'm wondering if H, if it needs to be changed to that have been materially revised by a board committee. So let's say in HR, they're looking at policy, but, they change, like we had a word change earlier, there's no material change to the policy. Can those be put on the consent agenda, or you're just going to funnel those to the regular agenda anyway, even though it's not a material change to the policy or the bylaw?
So my concern would be what would be the definition of material. Anyone may see that differently, right? It could potentially be subjectively applied. I just think that if whatever was on the HR agenda, the policy, if there is any changes to that, I think it just is good practice just to bring it to the board. Now, obviously, the rest of the committee or the board may feel differently about this if it is discussed on Wednesday, if we do approve it tonight, but that's sort of my opinion on it. It just ensures, right, that
Sure.
anything that got changed every board member will have an opportunity to have that specifically called out to them by having it on the agenda rather than just rolled into the consent agenda.
And I'm okay with that. That's probably the most, the safest way to go about it, if you will. But I just wanted to bring that up, so.
That's a good point.
Yeah, the only other thing that I kind of want to point out about this, so, and we did discuss this as well while we were thinking about the revisions. You know, that last sentence, I know Dr. Siebert's concern was around, you know, how this policy might provide a superintendent with the opportunity to pull an item basically off the agenda, how was it worded? And defer it for further study, right? Without anyone else weighing in. My concern was, it also seemed to imply that any board member could do the same. Because it says,
Right.
be deferred further study discussion at a subsequent board meeting if the superintendent or any board member thinks the item requires further discussion. We have Robert's Rules of Order to deal with concerns about that where, you know, an item can either be, you know, referred back to committee, tabled. So I don't think we want to create a situation where you could create like a permanent filibuster because it originally appeared on a consent agenda. Because if that were to happen, right, if there was a policy or item that was in the consent agenda that an individual board member didn't like, as soon as it was pulled out of the consent agenda by the board member saying, you know, I want this added to the current full board agenda, this language would suggest that they could immediately then say, I want it deferred. And I presume then it would come back through the consent agenda. So I wanted to get rid of that endless loop and allow us to rely on the parliamentary procedure that we have in place and follow so that it would take a majority of board members to defer an item after it would come off the consent agenda rather than one member's lone desire to do that.
Although I would think if it comes off the consent agenda, then it's not going to go back on the consent agenda. Right?
Well, that would have been my assumption too until I read the sentence. I mean, it says, any item on the consent agenda, this is what we're proposing to remove. Any item on the consent agenda may be removed and discussed as a non-action item or be deferred for further study and discussion at a subsequent board meeting if the superintendent or any board member thinks the item requires further discussion.
Gotcha.
So, I just, rather than give that much power to one board member, I think, you know, we wanna entrust the full board, or a majority of those voting, to make those decisions, not one board member.
Well, and the other thing that comes to mind for me is, even if they want further discussion, which is fine, but sometimes our decisions are very timely and they need to be done that month without calling some special meeting. So it's probably important to allow the discussion, but not maybe the delay or the moving of agenda items, so.
All right, any other comments, concerns, questions? If not, I would entertain a motion to approve policy 0166.1 consent agenda as presented. Mrs. Voigt,
I so move.
I'll second it.
seconded by Mr. Borowski. Any further discussion or debate? If not, all in favor say aye.
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 Aye, opposed? Passes 4-0. All right, next on our agenda, Section F, Government Relations Discussion and Information Items. Our first is an update on the 2025 through 2027 state budget. Dr. Siebert.
All right, thank you, Mr. Wad. So, as you had said earlier, we did not have a March meeting, but if we go back to February, the governor delivered his budget address in mid-February on the 18th. The Joint Finance Committee has now begun their series of public hearings. They've had two already last week. They had one on Wednesday in Kaukauna and then one on Friday at the State Fair Park in West Dallas. And I included for you the comments that I submitted to the Joint Committee on Finance electronically, as well as to our local legislators who we have a great relationship with and rapport with. And our own Senator Bradley is on the Joint Finance Committee, which is a significant piece. So I always think those opportunities to talk to the Joint Finance Committee are nice ways to promote what we're proud of, as well as to talk about what would help us. And we were very successful, I think, through our individual relationships with legislators in the last budget biennium, where we got the low revenue ceiling relief that helped us go from spending at a little over 10,200 to 11,000 and now 11,325 in a way that, as I reference in here, allows for local control and local decision-making, right? That's not state money that does that. That's up to the board to levy in the local community in order to make that happen. And we've been in such a good position with our mill rate and with our overall tax rate being the lowest in Waukesha County that we've been able to do that, and it's made a significant impact for the school district of Waukesha. The other thing is the special ed funding, right? So we're now over $20 million that we transfer every year from Fund 27, which is the special ed fund, to Fund 10. And so there is some discussion around special ed funding. Where that might go is yet to be determined. The number the governor uses is 60%. The number that a lot of groups have advocated for is 60%. That's a significant jump from where we are, which is roughly 30%. So anything in that ballpark moves the needle for us, which is spendable revenue that floats all boats because it reduces the transfer. So talk about those few things, but more importantly, I also talk about, not more importantly, but equally importantly, how hard our staff works, how the resources that the board has invested in, over $6 million over the last 3 years, how that has really strengthened what our staff is able to do. And while it's increased their workload trying to learn those resources, it's also lessened their workload because they're not having to self-curate, right? And we're seeing some really good results with that. We also talk about how that use of ESSER dollars, 37% on learning, recovery, and educational resources, spending 53% of that ESSER money on HVAC work in buildings that we know we're going to maintain, and investing $15 million in facilities last summer. We did all of that without asking more money from our constituents, and we're still on a rapid pace of defeasement in order to pay off a 2018 referendum in 2026, which will make us debt-free. So I don't think there are very many districts that can talk about themselves that way. And in that process, we highlighted in the last newsletter that we did that we had saved the taxpayers $1.7 million to date. We're now going to be closer to $2 million that we'll save because of that rapid prepayment. So I think we have a lot to be proud of. I think the challenge that most districts have are, and we talked about it in F&F, we have declining enrollment like most districts do. Inflation has been a significant challenge in personal lives, in organizational lives, right, in the economy in general. And so we will see where the state budget goes, or whether or not there actually is a state budget. I think that's a question, right, as if one actually gets done. If one doesn't get done, we work under the current 23-25 state budget. So there wouldn't be any increases in per pupil funding, et cetera, or special ed funding. So we'll continue to advocate, and we'll continue to have conversations with our own local legislators. I think that's where we can make some hay. Perhaps we could talk about maybe having Senator Bradley back with our committee to talk about what he heard in the Joint Finance Committee hearings. There's two more that are in the North Woods, Hayward and is it Wausau? Wausau? Yes, so those are coming up. And yeah, overall, it's going to be interesting to watch kind of where it shakes out. But I guess why don't I just stop for a little bit? It's kind of, I get kind of excited to talk about the things that we've done, because I think we should be really proud of those things. And I don't think we often in education, toot our own horn enough. And I think ours is a horn that deserves to be tooted. We do a lot of good things in Waukesha, and we put a lot of resources and money into the classroom, which is where it should be. And I think people deserve to know that. And then I think any changes that would happen in terms of low spending relief that would allow local control, which we believe very strongly in. And any changes in special ed funding or mental health funding would be welcomed and would be significantly advantageous not only to us, but any school district in Wisconsin. So I said I was going to stop talking, and I just kept going. But now I will stop.
Thank you, Dr. Siebert. Mrs. White?
Last, 2 years ago, you had designed the info sheet as well. Do we have something like that this time around? I think this does a great job of putting into words, but sometimes the
graphics, sure.
infographic kind of format just makes it, at a glance, being able to see some of the accomplishments that we've made.
Sure.
In a more pictorial kind of way.
Yeah, I think we haven't done it yet, Mrs. Voigt. I think we can. We've been a little more focused on the long-range planning process that we're engaging in. And when we originally created that sheet, it was when we went to the Capitol and met with the legislators, and we used it as a talking points sheet. I think we can create it because we have the template. Just update it with our new numbers. And ultimately, I can share that with the committee and beyond, as well as with our local legislators. So it'll be something that, as we get a little further, I think, into the long-range planning, it'll free Mary Jo up to have some time to, that's her gift, being able to I just give her the numbers on, all scratched up, and then she makes it look good.
And I think one of the pieces is the thank you, that they listened last year. And I think to have that be, like in a pictorial kind of way, is like, thank you for listening in the past. It really has helped us. And and now these are our current concerns, like kind of a bulleted thing.
Sure.
It just makes it, they had so many things to listen to. I used Wisconsin Eye to watch the public hearing process last Friday, and there's so many different appeals, and they all get like 3 minutes, I think it was.
Two.
2 or 3, it just seemed.
5 if you're a group, yeah.
Yeah, sometimes, yeah, the
Yes.
groups of like one person speak for a minute, then another one, and another one. But it's like to be able to put it all down, your thoughts in one spot like this is like, I just felt like this was a really good way to go. And not, you to be there at 7 in the morning to have a slot by 2 in the afternoon.
Well, like I had said to you, I had planned on going, and then when it overlapped with our board packet day, and then thinking about the significant time commitment that it is, I thought I could get the message across this way. And then when I did share it with our local legislators, like I always do, to your point, is thank them for their partnership, thank them for, the relationship that we have and for their service, because it's not an easy job. I don't know how you know something about all the various things that education is one piece, right? There's many other interests that have to be considered by legislators, but also always encouraging them that if they have any questions about this or legislation or anything, that they can reach out, and they do, right? And that's probably the greatest relationship we can have, is when they're asking for our input on those pieces, and that's because of the relationship that the board and administration have developed.
Mr. Brooks?
Yeah, I echoing a lot of what's already been said, I think we have a really, really great story to tell here in Waukesha, and I think more people need to hear it, because the Waukesha way has been successful here, and I think a lot of other folks can look to us as a model for, especially larger school districts, what can be accomplished. And I know Mrs. Voigt mentioned she watched the hearing. I've sat through a couple of those, and when it's important, and it's important to allow everybody to get their voice heard. But eventually, it's a lot of people saying similar things, and so I think when we can go forward and say, here's what we've done with what we've gotten, and thank you for helping us with some of these things, but telling our story and then showing, but imagine what we could do if we had this 60% special ed reimbursement, but imagine what we could do if we got the low revenue ceiling raised again, and giving specific, tangible, this is what we need the resources for. It's not just give us a blank pot of money, it's we need it specifically for this. I think lawmakers appreciate hearing the specifics of how their dollars are going to be spent in the school district. So I think this was a really great way to lay out what we've done in Waukesha and what we can do going forward if we get the resources that we would like to see. So I appreciate you taking the time to put this together and telling our story.
Thank you, Mr. Brooks.
Yeah, and I'm going to dovetail on that a little bit. So one of the things I think it's really important to always point out, especially when we're talking specifically about the special ed funding, we are mandated to spend that money by by the state and the federal government. We are mandated to do so. But yet we're only provided 30% of the funding to do it. I think all of us agree on the importance of ensuring that our special ed, programs are properly funded and that those students are getting what they need. But I think going back and reminding the legislature that this is a mandate you placed on us and all the other school districts. And as a result of the shortage in funding that you provide but require us to spend, we have to divert over $20 million of our money to a completely separate fund, which, going back to Mr. Brooks's point, allows us to say there's so much more we could be doing for our full school population if the state just met 60% of the mandated funds that they require us as a district to spend. And I do agree with Mr. Brooks. When we can say, and when we have gotten funds before, whether it was ESSER funds or other funds, look at how responsibly we have spent them. I've watched other districts in this state take a very different path with some of those windfall funds they've gotten. And I mean, I can't say that I know for certain, although Mr. Brooks might be able to. I suspect that when someone from a school district that used ESSER funds to dramatically add to the cost of salary and benefits without having any other source for that income come forward, forcing them into a referendum in order to be able to cover those expenses, leaves legislators feeling like, why would I give you this additional funding? All you're going to do is spend it on what it was not intended for. And so I appreciate very much the way that this is framed. Mr. Brooks is right. It is a story that is important to tell, and I think sets a precedent for other schools who wish to find themselves debt-free, who wish to find themselves in the situation we do where we're able to revamp our curriculum and do all of these capital improvements that we've done without having to go back to the taxpayers for a referendum. I think we can tell that story quite credibly as a result of what we've done, and this tells it here, so I appreciate that. Mrs. White.
And I also think by having it in writing, as I'm listening to all these different things, I can't help but think that the panel up there has, like, their heads have to be spinning after listening from 10 to 5, without a break per se, except for calling up the names of the next people in line, to keep all that straight and be able to have, like this, you have it in writing. You can see our story, in the details of it, like very, very clearly spelled out, and it's something in their hands and not just like, well, I think they said something good about that, about Waukesha and what they're doing there. I think this is a really smart way. I think the way you handle it was really very positive in that context.
Any other comments on the state budget update? All right, if not, we can move on to our next government relations discussion and information item. That would be educational legislation and bills. Dr. Siebert, I think you have an update on one for us.
Oh, yeah, I just, you and Mr. Watt and I, when we were talking, we picked this one because it's one that's been discussed by our committee, it's been discussed by our board. It's around student testing standards, accountability results. There was AB1 that went forward, and it's since been vetoed. But I wanted to just include it for you because I know it's something that, as a committee and as a board and as administration, we've had good discussions over, and concerns with the inability to have data that can be compared year over year over year, right? Because there continually are changes to report cards, there are continually changes to standards, and that makes it difficult to show the performance of our students across the state of Wisconsin in a genuine manner, if you will. So I just, more than anything, wanted to share with you that isn't moving forward, and then I know it's something that you have passion about and allow you just to have some discussion.
Just a quick clarification, Dr. Siebert. As I understand this bill, what was passed through both the Assembly and Senate, I believe, right? It passed both
Yes.
chambers?
Yes.
Was to return the DPI standards for evaluating exams, the standardized exams and so forth, back to their 2021 and 2022 standards. So we talked a lot about the standards that were changed under Superintendent Underly. We had quite a vigorous discussion around that in our board meeting a couple of months ago as we were looking at report cards. But this was to return them so that we would once again have data that was, I think, pretty much agreed upon, that was decent, but at least gave us baselines to evaluate year over year. Is that correct? That was what the bill was.
You are correct. There's two dates in there. So for the report cards, it was back to the 2019-20.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And then for the pre-ACT, it was 21-22.
Okay.
So it's easy to cross the numbers.
But that was the intention, correct?
That was the intention,
Great,
correct.
okay. Do we know why Governor Evers chose to veto it? I believe that he had expressed verbally, at least, an interest in doing this. Do we know why he vetoed the?
What I read was he vetoed it because he did not believe the legislature should be the ones making this decision, and he didn't want to usurp the authority of the state superintendent. That's what I read in his press release in a nutshell.
Any comments, questions? Mr. Brooks?
Yeah, that was the reason that he gave for vetoing it, and Mr. Wadd's right. He'd previously called changing these standards a mistake and said that he disagreed with them. What's interesting to note is the standards that they would be resetting to were the ones that Governor Evers set when he was then State Superintendent Evers. So he vetoed resetting the standards back to what he set them at when he was running DPI. It's really frustrating. I think this is one of the reasons why people get tired of government, because it should just be, having high standards for kids shouldn't be a partisan issue. It should be obvious. And I do think, the public conversation around this bill was largely around the standards and the cut scores. I do think what kind of got missed from that discussion was what Dr. Siebert pointed out, which is the new criteria, the new cut scores make it incredibly difficult for school districts to compare year to year. And when you have districts like ours, which has invested millions of dollars into rigorous curriculum, and we're trying to overhaul, our reading curriculum, our math curriculum, we want to be able to see the data that says the decisions that we are making and the dollars that we are investing are working. And we have internal metrics that can show us that, but it would be nice to have a standard across the board. And I've said this numerous times, but if the whole point of having standardized tests and making kids do them and making teachers take time out of their week to prep for them and conduct these tests, the purpose of these standardized tests is to have a baseline that is just strictly unbiased. This is where your kids are at any given moment. It's a snapshot in time. If the metrics that we are using to evaluate those standardized tests aren't standardized, then those tests are not helpful. And that's certainly one of the most frustrating things about this. Was I think this would have restored them to the NAEP standards, which are generally considered to be much higher than what they're currently set at now. But frustrating. Hopefully there's some other solution. Maybe DPI can work those things through if they continue to hear from districts, but certainly frustrating when you see the governor publicly say that he thought the changes were a mistake, but then he has the opportunity to take action on that and he doesn't.
Thank you, Mr. Brooks. Anyone else have any comments? All right, thank you for the update, Dr. Siebert.
Sure.
That brings us to our other business. Item 1, recommendations for future meetings. Anyone have anything that they would like to? I think the one thing I was going to suggest, you already alluded to, Dr. Siebert, and that is inviting Senator Bradley and perhaps our other legislators back so that we can hear more about what's going on and get an opportunity to discuss them, some of our concerns, and follow up on those things we've talked to them about in the past, so.
Sure, we can work on that.
I know this is a busy time, and it may not be something we can do right away, so, but just maybe starting to find a way to get them on our calendar would be beneficial.
Yeah, I would say that generally speaking, and Mr. Brooks, please help if you'd like to, that the budget cycle summers are much different for them than the off-budget cycle when they're doing the legislative study committees and so forth. And so we've generally been much more successful in the summer meetings in those off years. This summer might be a little, we can still offer and see what we can do, but we'll definitely put a priority on Senator Bradley and see if we can get him here next month.
Thank you. All right. With that, we have no other business on the agenda. Our next meeting is scheduled for Monday, May 12th, 7 PM right here. Well, I don't know. I'm not sure that we have a time set yet, do we? Given that the board is essentially reorganizing.
We will have a reorganizational meeting,
Yeah.
you're correct, at the end of April,
So we may not know exactly when the next meeting is or time. That could change between now and May 12th and May. So, but right now, we're targeting May 12th for our next Policy and Government Relations Committee meeting. With that, meeting is adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.